Hello, welcome, Lucid community. I'm so happy and honored to be here today with a gentleman that I've been following for quite a while. That who just celebrated 15 years as of about 24 hours ago, the time of this shooting. So, congratulations, Matt.
And I appreciate it. And I sincerely thank you for having me on, be able to share a little bit about who I am, my journey, and hopefully somebody, one person, can pick something up of value that they can use or pass on. So honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Matt Hermes, and I've been following Matt for a while. Um, I think that it's so important that when it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to get sober, right? But so many people that I know, myself included, was like, okay, I blew up my fucking life. Maybe I'll get sober, but there's no way I'm going to be able to rebuild the things, so to speak. And to be very, very clear, my definitions of success, as everybody knows, is not as a collector of things per se, right? It's who can we help? How can we make a difference in the world? You're born broke, you die broke. What did you do in between to make a difference? But my thought pattern before I got sober is even if I get sober, how the fuck am I going to rebuild my life? And is that even possible? And so that's why I think it's so incredibly important to share stories like yours, who people that have not just succeeded and got sober, but were able to then take that sobriety, if you will, and then rebuild a beautiful, beautiful, abundant life. And I think that if we don't show people that part of where they can go, nobody's going to fucking get sober.
Yeah, that's a valid point. And as you were saying that, and you were talking about, destroying and rebuilding, and we'll get into the destruction that I had and the creation of where we are. But it took me back to a quote, and I don't know who said it. I got to figure out that who that was. But it's what's your dash? What fills up your dash? So I was born in
Mm.
1965, and God forbid I make it, another 50 years, but let's say I passed away today. My gravestone says 1965-2024. What's in that dash?
Mm.
And there's story of success, there's stories of success, failure, redemption, so on and so forth. And I want that dash to be moving forward of contribution, giving back, fulfillment, trust, love, all those things. So,
Mm.
it's really interesting when you look at, anybody's life is what's your dash? What's that? What did you fill it with?
I love
So
that. We're going to be talking about the quote unquote success. And I always say quote unquote, because I know more miserable people than I care to know that are worth 20, 30, 40, $100 million, and they're just absolutely miserable. And so how can we um, build a beautiful life of meaning, not of things? And one of the things that super attracts me to your story is not only your sobriety, but and we'll talk about this later. You and I know each other through this amazing group, Go Abundance, who is all about building meaning and principles. So let's go before the life of meaning. Like, let's talk about your active addiction and kind of what happened and what was that, after you talk about that, what was that pivot point that enabled you to have that mustard seed of willingness to get into recovery and do this deal?
Yeah, so MJ, it's so I'm 59, um, 15 years sober, so that means, stop drinking at 44.
Mm,
Um, I picked up my first drink at I'm I don't know how old I was. I was either 13 or 14.
mm,
Um, had a great life, a great, growing up. Parents were there, they were supportive. My dad is a recovering alcoholic. He's been sober probably coming up on 40 years. Um,
wow.
but we had moved from Connecticut to Virginia, going into my eighth grade year, and I ran into a guy that he invited me to a basketball game at, I don't know, a high school basketball game or something like that. And as we were leaving, this is in the early 80s, you walked everywhere. We didn't get, rides or crap like that. So as we were leaving, he said, "Hey, come across the street." And where I live, it was a newer subdivision, and there were houses being built. And he went and he reached down in the woods, and he picked up two of the big tall boys of Budweiser. And at some point in that Budweiser's life, they were cold, but these things were warm. They were, it was in that. I remember the brown bag, the brown bags that
Yeah,
you put the
sure.
big beers in, and they were in the glass bottles. And he's like, "Here, try this." And I took a sip of it and took another one, and I probably finished the thing, and I don't know, while we were walking. Um, and it was I'm a huge introvert. I always have been. But that first beer allowed a introverted person in a new school, a new neighborhood, a new state to be somebody a little bit different.
Mm,
Um, More outgoing, more fun, this and this. And I'm like, God dang, this is nice. This is good. Um, Couple days later, we did it again, and I basically was off and running. I don't I don't know the where it jumped to another point, but all through high school I drank whenever I could. I never drank during school or before school, but it was, weekends I was always drinking. I remember I played football and soccer in high school. I remember picking up something the before a football game, and was pretty buzzed on the bus, and one of my coaches kind of realized it. Of course, I played it off, and I
mm.
got to play. And I think I had I was a punter and a kicker, and I had probably one of the best games that I ever had. Um, but man, I was off and running, and then went to college, played soccer in college, and um, drank a lot. You're free. Alcohol was everywhere. It was prevalent. Um, and I was drunk. I was an alcoholic probably. I My dad called me out my sophomore year in college, so that was probably 85 or 86. He called me on the phone, and we were talking, and I don't know how we figured it out, but he's like, "Look, I think you might have an alcohol problem." And I'm basically told him to F himself, "You're
Mm.
crazy." But deep down inside, I had a pretty good idea that I needed to stop, but I didn't. And from there it just kind of progressed. I drank, I don't know, I don't know how many days I drank, a week, but it was more than one, and it was probably more than five.
Mm.
But never, I always drank beer. I every very rarely would I have a glass of wine or a mixed drink, but Bud Light was my drink of choice. Um, so met my future wife in Charleston, South Carolina. Um, we ended up getting married in 1998, and I drank fairly heavily up until November 13th of 2009, when the the final ultimatum came that I finally listened to. you know
Mm.
Carmen had expressed concern, had begged, pleaded for me to stop drinking. And that November, that day, it was, it was actually the night before, November 12th. She and I were sitting in our kitchen. I didn't know exactly where I was. And she said, "Look, I talked to my mom. My mom said that kids and I can come live with her. Um,
Mm,
you're not welcome there unless you stop drinking."
mm.
And that was the bottom, if you will. And everybody's got to find it, man. We all say that, and it was, for me, that was it. It finally rang that, shit, I'm about to lose my wife. I'm about to lose my kids.
Yeah.
Literally, we were 3 weeks from that point, of being homeless.
Mm,
We were losing our house. We lost that house. We Cars were repossessed.
mm.
Um, you name it, we were $500,000 in debt. Um, we lost everything. Um, but that's kind of where it is. There's a lot of stuff in between that we can get into. But to answer your question in long-winded answer, that's where it was. I started when I was, let's say, 13, drank until I was 44. Um, there were some good times in there, and there were some really crappy, shitty times in there. Um,
Mm.
Sorry, I have a tendency to cuss some. So,
No, no, listen, if you don't
uh,
cuss, I mean, I'm a New Yorker. I don't trust anyone who
well, yeah.
doesn't cuss.
All right.
So, I
So
mean,
does that answer your question?
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Very rarely do people tell my story in a general way. And you just told my story. I was around 13. I was completely uncomfortable in my own skin, and that drink suddenly was the answer to all my problems. And then going into, to college, it just escalated and escalated. And then my father showed up out of nowhere because I guess every time I spoke to him at this camp, I was high and so same way your father, my father. And then I got an ultimatum from my girlfriend that said, if you use cocaine one more time, MJ, we're done. I said, okay, no problem. Now the difference where our paths split at that point is I just said, fuck it. And we went out to dinner, me and Jen, my girlfriend at the time. And yeah, I didn't realize I had excused myself to the bathroom 12 times in the first 9 minutes to do bumps of cocaine. And she looked at me and she said, really? And I said, what? And she says, okay, we're done. And we're friends now. She's married with kids and, um, but, so when I work with people, here's the thing: people that don't lose everything. Um, I'm not saying it's harder to get sober, but if they don't very clearly see what their bottom's going to look like, it's infinitely harder to get sober. So in your case and
Yeah.
my case, we lost everything. And there was no place to go other than a church basement. That's it. Um,
Church
and
basement.
that's
That's
it.
funny.
That was it. That was literally a church basement to show up to the meetings that I've been going to for 20 years, but I just would refuse to work this quote unquote cult. I would call it the steps. Um,
Yeah.
and that was it. That was it.
And with that, I'll get calls every now and then, and where people will reach out to me that know I'm sober, and they've got family members or they've got friends that are they feel are actively in a alcoholic situation, and they're like, "Can you help my friend? Can you help
Mm.
my son? Can you help my brother?" And I'm like, "No,
Yep. Yep.
I really can't. I'm happy to talk to him or her,
Yep.
but I I can't help them. If they don't want to stop drinking, there's nothing I can do or say. Just like you found, there's nothing that you can do or say that will
Yep.
make them stop. They have to. I mean, my wife told me 100 times probably, you have to stop drinking. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. I'm, the kids are, you know, whatever.
Yep.
But until I made that decision, there is nothing that anybody can do to stop me from drinking.
Yep.
I Forcing someone to, I know so many people that have been quote unquote forced or mandated to go to a sober living facility or inpatient care. If they don't want to go, if they're not fully committed to going, it's a failure. It doesn't work.
Oh, perfect example. I went to rehab. The night out of rehab, um, my roommate said, "Hey, listen, my father lives down the street. We'll have a nice sober night. You'll crash on the couch. I'll wake you up in the morning and put you on the train." I said, "Great." He wakes me up at around 2 in the morning, and he like goes like this, like in other words, it's calling me. He said, "Come on, let's take a drive." I said, "No, no, Ray, no, no, no." So before you know it, we're driving around to crack houses in Katona, New York, and he pushes a glass pipe in front of me and says, "Here, smoke." Ray, I'm not much of a crack smoker. I thought I was very uppity being a cocaine guy and not really doing crack. I'd only done crack a few times, and if it was classified as freebase, so, which meant I wasn't, that bad. Anyway, bottom line is I smoked crack and nobody saw me for the next 7 years. So,
Mm,
sometimes there's that willingness that happens inside of that 28-day treatment center,
yeah.
but very rarely, like you need to be separated from drugs and alcohol. And if you can get that somehow attached to that mustard seed of willingness and throw yourselves in. But very sadly, what I've learned is even if you get out and you're kind of following a path for a week or two, um, you invariably it's just so easy to fall back into your that's the whole reason why I created Lucid, to try to surround people with other sober people, to so they, because if addiction is a disease of isolation and you're coming out of rehab and everybody around you is drinking and drugging, you're fucked. And so we want to
Mm.
surround people with, okay, they go to their meeting once a day. How can we surround them with just an infinite support system of people who share that common bond? And because otherwise, I think that the odds are stacked against you.
How well is that working for the community
It's
that you've
working
created?
amazing because it goes on the principles of, it's that whole concept of one addict helping another, and we're uniquely qualified to help another addict because though our experiences are different, those feelings of wanting to get out of the now are the same. So what'll happen is, um, I'm very, very level set, you know, after my 12-step meeting each day. I feel really good. And then 2, 3, 4 hours later, I start getting antsy. I start moving away from the very things that were keeping me on the ball 3, 4 hours before. And so what we found is if we can set certain trigger points throughout the day to let people regather and come back. That's why we send 3 push notifications a day to bring people back in. um, then they connect, and it's just everything in the community is like, oh, I feel like drinking. I don't know what to do. Then people come in, love them, identify with them, and before you know it, there's 78 comments, and they're not feeling like that special snowflake anymore. And
Yeah,
so it's
and
just a beautiful connection point.
what's interesting is you said something that you go to a meeting 3, 4, 5 hours later, you're starting to feel a little squirrely again. And look, I say only 15 years sober, but that's a lot of time depending on who you're talking to. And then to others, there's guys that and women 20, 30, 35, 40 years. But I've got a handful of days,
Mhm.
that I've been sober. But this is a fucked up disease because it's like um an example. I had left a meeting a year or so ago, and on my way home, I passed a couple of liquor stores, and one night there was one that I passed, and it was on the right hand side of the road, and the sign was in the one of the windows, and it was just flashing open, open,
Mm.
open, open, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna pull in. I just want to see what the inside of that store looks like. I want to walk down the aisles. I want to see where the Bud Light is and just kind of walk through and then, just so I have an idea, so I don't have to drive by here and just be curious about that. And all
Mm,
that happened in probably 2 seconds.
mm,
And but it was like a 5 minute reel in my
yep.
head. And
Yep.
then it's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yes.
What, what? It's like I had just left an AA meeting, just left a meeting, and I'm driving by this store and I see this open, open,
Yep.
open. And it's like pulling me in. This stuff is the recovery process and the alcoholism and the sickness and the addiction. It's always there. And I
Yes.
don't think I probably would have gone in, but it's just like, where did that come from? Where
Mm,
did the back of my brain obviously isn't cured because
yep.
I still have these thoughts and I still and there's days where I'll have I'm just like everybody else. If I had a good day, I wanted to drink. If I had a bad day, I wanted to drink.
Yep.
If it was cold, rainy, and wet, I wanted to sit back and have a fire and drink. If Monday night football was on, shit, great opportunity to drink. If it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon and people were out or I'm playing tennis or watching a football game, I want to drink. There's always an opportunity to
Yes.
make something that alcohol is uh fun, it's relaxing, it's entertaining, but at the same time, dude, and I know you can relate to this, or those that have put a few days together. There is nothing better than being able to go to a party, go to a tailgate, go to a concert, go to a bar, and not have a drink,
Yeah.
because I don't have to worry about tomorrow morning waking up, rolling over in
Yep.
bed, and looking at my wife and thinking, did I do something that if
Yes.
she wakes up, she's going to be pissed? I don't,
Mm,
is there something I need to apologize about? Is there something that I did to embarrass myself or her? I don't have to do that anymore. I know if I wake up in the morning, my wife is pissed about something, I
mm.
know what I did,
Yep.
right? And
Oh yeah.
it's a freeing thing that I don't have to wake up and have I puked on myself, as I have I pissed myself, you know,
Yep.
or check. I don't have to check my phone and my text messages for, dude, you were hammered last night. Do you remember
Mm,
what you did with this, and this? And most importantly, and God, I'm so lucky, I don't have to worry about waking up in jail and
yes.
figuring out what the
I
hell I did.
never remembered what I did when I would wake up in a jail cell. I never remembered what I did. I'd always have to ask my lawyer, the judge, or the CO. Normally, I'd
See,
find out from the CO because I'd say,
yeah, yeah.
what happened?
I was super lucky. I never went to jail. I never got a DUI. I
Yeah.
never got in an accident. I never was physically abusive to my wife or kids, probably
Mm,
verbally, emotionally, certainly.
mm,
But I'm one of the lucky ones in that. And, to that, I thank God that, I didn't have to go through that. My bottom was not where a lot of people's is, but
yeah.
we
Yeah.
talk about bottom. I mean, I had a plan of how I was going to get out of my misery, if you will. We live about an hour and a half north of um, a lake, or we live on a lake, but about an hour and a half north of us is an interstate that I used to drive up,
Right.
for whatever. And I had my plans were I noticed when I went that there's one section of this bridge that the guardrail's real low.
Mm,
So I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do. I got insurance. I'm not gonna leave a note. My wife is miserable. My kids are miserable. We have no money. I just drive off that bridge. I'm gone. My wife gets the insurance.
yep.
Because there's no suicide per se. There's no note to say, sorry, honey.
Yep.
you know the kids, they were 8, 9, and 10 at the time. They would be okay, they would remember me, but over time, at that age, hopefully I
Yep.
haven't fucked them up too much. but that's how that thinking was. And again, I don't know that I would ever have done it, but that's how messed up our my mind was at the time, that that's what was going to happen. And you know, we were we were just flat ass broke. And now I look at it today, and I made mention of this last night at a meeting. Um, I wouldn't trade my life today for anything. I wouldn't wish my past on anyone,
Mm,
but I'm the person that I'm today because of
because of it.
everything that I did up to that point. And you and I talked the other day, and I'm like, if I didn't get sober on November 13th, 2009, which is Friday the 13th, if I got sober a week before or a day before or a year before, I wouldn't be in the same situation that I am. You and I would not be having this
Yep.
conversation. It just wouldn't. Um,
Yeah.
it's just a really interesting concept of time and perspective, and timing is really everything. If I gotten sober a day before, maybe I don't know. I just I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
I love how you said, that you don't wish your past on anyone, but it's because of your past of who you are today. And so if you look at the delta of where you were then, bankrupt, $500,000 in debt, right, to where you are now, right, again, and I met you through a very high performance success group, the Go Abundance. What the fuck happened to I know what happened, recovery happened to get you from $500,000 in debt and no hope of ever getting sober to getting sober and where you are today. Let's kind of talk about like how that the genesis of that.
Yeah, so being broke is a huge motivation. Um, we basically reset. I kind of say I reset everything January 1st of 2010. Um, Literally, like I said, we had lost our house, we had lost the cars. I had borrowed I think it was $8,000 from my oldest brother to buy a car. Um, so we did have that. But we were 2 days from being homeless. I'm in real estate, and a client of mine allowed us to rent their house from them, um, literally right at the nick of time, and that kind of started us back. What I did do is I made a commitment that I was never going to go in debt again. Um, the only debt that we carry now is our real estate. We don't have credit card debt, we don't have car debt, we don't have um, loans of any type other than real estate. So how we got to that was just putting things together and changing my attitude from um, or changing back from I used to be a very giving, unselfish person, and then at some point through my addiction, I became very selfish.
Mm,
Um, from there, when let's just use the date, November 13th, 09, I then began to very slowly but quickly over time got back to a giving type of
mm,
sense of being. Um, So I just gave and I gave and I gave and I volunteered and I did whatever I could to give back to those people that had, number one, given Carmen and my family so much. And I use this as an example that Thanksgiving, when we had lost our house, we had just gotten sober. We didn't have money for a Thanksgiving meal, and the church that we were attending provided a meal for us.
mm,
Well, we started caring and kind of moving that ball forward in the opposite direction. Um, this year, my myself, my wife, and my real estate team will probably hand out 250 meals to people in need this year.
Mm.
However, there's a I busted my ass at work and still do.
Yep.
It's not like for me, I just started giving and then, oh,
Yep.
things are great. There's a balance to it. I had to and still work and you know, do everything I can to provide an income for my family and my kids. And we've had some challenges with that. My youngest daughter lost her eyesight at 8, so we're still
Mm.
dealing with that. My
Mm.
oldest son has a real we adopted 2 kids. Oldest 2 are adopted from the Ukraine. Then we had a biological child. Our oldest, who's adopted, has a very rare uh, disease, if you will, where he's missing an enzyme in his blood that he needed to get transfusions and so on and so forth. And my daughter lost her sight. We're dealing with all that.
Mm.
Um, but it's you work hard, you give, um, you counsel, and stuff just starts to happen. But it happened because I made the decision not to take a drink
Yep.
yesterday or the day before or 15 years ago. If I started to drink again, I'd be right back to where I was. I know it. I'd probably be dead in 6 months, if not 9 months.
Mm. In the same way that in 12 steps, and that's where I was wanted to talk about the synergies. There's these, like someone said to me the other day, MJ, just to be clear, who I am is a result of the 12 steps, right? So someone said to me, MJ, you really are, apparently a really nice, giving, whatever person, right? And I said, well, if I'm a 12-step guy, I have to be. Meaning, if I'm going by the principles of 12-step, honest, open, willing, that's kind of the HOW of the program. I got to clean up my side of the street as soon as something goes wrong. Um, I can't, I don't have any, I am not qualified to handle anger of any sort, not even justified anger, as it talks about in the 12 and 12. So we're not even allowed to hold on to any resentments. And so there's this, if I follow the principles of recovery, and again, I only speak for myself, the Lucid community knows that we're all inclusive of anyone who chooses to live a sober life, regardless of whether you're in a 12-step program or not, or what your program is. The only thing we ask is for you to be sober. Um, is that if I'm following those principles, I am going to be a pretty outstanding person. And what I found with the Go Bros that I've come across in the events that I've gone, they all seem to follow the same kind of moral code of conduct, if you will. Um, and so and that code of conduct of integrity and time, because recovery, we're all about time, one day at a time, 24 hours a day, sometimes 1 minute at a time. So talk about, especially even time, where you see kind of a cross section of, or I should even say a beautiful alignment between the principles of the GoBundance. Again, GoBundance is men and women, but you're part of the GoBundance men, which is like 700, I think, GoBros in total as of a couple of years ago. But where do you see the kind of the beautiful kind of alignment between GoBros and the principles that you learned in recovery that were able to save your life?
Well, that's a good question. So with sobriety, um, comes humility, right?
Yep.
And I think in GoBundance you have that same thing. Everybody, uh, for the most part, in in GoBundance, you have very humble men, and I'll speak to the men because that's the side that I'm on.
Right.
Very humble men that uh, to a man has achieved some level of success and are willing to share that,
Mm.
right? Just like we're sober and I want to share my sobriety and whatever help I can give to someone that's trying to get sober. The same thing in GoBundance. I can call anybody up, in GoBundance, if I know them or I don't know them, and let's say they're in a sector or a section of business that I want to learn from, I can call somebody up and say, hey, man, it's Matt Hermes with GoBundance. Got a question. I know that you do, whatever, apartment syndication. Love to learn a little bit more about that. Can I get 15, 20 minutes of your time? And without a doubt, I will
The
have an
answer is yes.
appointment set. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, giving, we a couple months ago, um, after the hurricane and went through Asheville, uh, I decided to load up. I, I'm in real estate. I own my own moving truck. I decided to load up my moving truck with supplies and take it to Asheville, North Carolina. I put
Mm,
a post in GoBundance, and I don't know, got a couple $1,000s within a couple of hours from GoBundance members. Just, hey, I can't do anything, but here's some cash. Go buy whatever
mm,
supplies you need. I got boxes of clothes sent to me that we were able to take up there. So it's just they want to give, they're purposeful, and they're sincere with it. There's a collaborative effort to share knowledge. Um, there's a collaborative effort and willingness to do good in the world.
mm.
Um, it's not all it's not all about them. It's not all about me. It's about what can I do for others that are within this organization, if you will. And we've got a bunch of masterminds and we've got a bunch of get-togethers, and um, it's a really unique. I'm honored to be able to be in there. Kind of have a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Do I really belong in this thing?
Yeah.
There's guys with net worths of hundreds of millions of dollars, and here I am with what I have, and it's like, God, I don't know if I belong here. But
Yeah.
uh, it's not about the it, money's certainly important, but it's not about the money. It's about the who the person is. Just like in AA, it doesn't matter if you've been sober for a week or a year or 15 years or 30 years. If you're trying and you're trying to stay on a path of sobriety, then anybody in the program should be open and willing to help.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, a few minutes ago, you were talking about, the time that you have. It's like I'm a firm believer that I remember I had somebody I heard somebody in a meeting and they had nothing of what I wanted, meaning they were what I would call a dry drunk, and but he had 20 years, and at the end he said, if any of yous want what I have, come get my number after the meeting. And I'm like, respectfully, bro, I want nothing that you have. And so that in recovery, I've often found someone with 6 months fresh out of doing the work has way more that I want than someone 25 years that are kind of like one toe in the pool, and white knuckling their sobriety. And so I think that it's important. I always say that if you're connected and you're plugged into principles of recovery, of acceptance, forgiveness, amends, and again, this isn't exclusive to 12 steps. Like even if you look before the 12 steps, there was the Oxford group. Before the Oxford group, there was Stoicism. Before Stoicism, they were all based upon the same principles of kind of releasing people from someone from self, from that bondage of self, so to speak. Um, and so I think that people get too hung up with time, meaning the quantity of time. And I love how you spoke about that because, you know, there was a guy that passed, I think, last year. His name was Arkansas Don, rest in peace. And he talked about how he would say, "Hey, my name is Don. I've been sober since 6:31 a.m." And it was that whole principle of uh that it is truly a one day at a time, and whoever woke up earliest is the most sober, and that's number one. And then depending upon the quality of their sobriety and their emotional sobriety is really where, the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And so how are we doing on dealing with not only staying sober one day at a time, but living a beautiful life? And that's kind of the hope that I want to give to the Lucid community of, okay, so you have this Hermes guy 500,000 in debt with no hope, thinking about the lower point of the guardrail and taking his life. And his 8, 9, and 10-year-old won't really remember him, or maybe we'll remember him a little bit, but they'll get over it. To now, we're talking about elite mastermind and like how we can give hope that that not only is that possible, but it's probable if you get sober and just start. It's kind of that old concept of like, and I loved how you talked about, okay, number one, I'm not in debt. I don't hold any debt, and kind of these kind of like, and brick by brick by brick. And before you know it, um, you have this beautiful life. And
Yeah.
it's that hope that I want to give people.
And that's the thing. I mean, if I would have looked back 15 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but let's say 15 years ago, and somebody said, hey, in 15 years you're going to have this, you're going to live on the lake, you're going to have, you know, you're going to have a life that you want to wake up to, and you have money and you have friends and you have family and you have all of the things, and emotionally, and most importantly, emotionally and physically, you're doing well.
Mm,
You're doing really well. I would have said that's a effing pipe dream. There
yep.
ain't no fucking way. What
Yep.
I can tell you, and what I will tell everyone that's listening to this, is it can happen. More than likely, it will happen, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not
Mm,
going to happen next week, but day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, things get a lot better. And
yep.
the things that you can accomplish a year from now is amazing.
Mm,
But you gotta work hard at it, and that's from a sobriety standpoint. It's from a work standpoint. It's from a family. Just getting sober doesn't mean that everything's going to be fine.
yep.
I can still be an asshole to my wife, my kids. I can still not show up for work and get fired, right? But it's a part. I have to stay sober. I have to be loving to my wife. I have to be respectful to my wife. I have to help my kids. I have to be a good business person. I have to run and manage my business as well. I have to give back to the community. I just can't not drink, because
Yep.
that's just one part of it. But without that part, it's a house of cards, and they're going
Yep.
to come down. So it's a
Yeah.
combination of everything. Just getting sober isn't going to make everything better. You still have to do everything else. But without, for me, and I'm speaking for me, without sobriety, none of this is possible.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah. Listen, they always say death, jail, or insanity. And so, if you're a real alcoholic, um, the only option for us, the sobriety is the price of entry. But then, as you said, getting sober is not the answer. It's the price of entry to get you to work and grow and figure out why it is that you drank in the first place. Because I never had a problem with alcohol, I had a problem with life. And so, why did I need something to block life? And to me, all the work had to do with figuring out why I needed to run away from life. And that's where the work is. And then once you get through the work, why, what I absolutely love is how you then keep elevating and elevating and elevating. And then you join GoBro and elevate more. And like you just never, the moment that you stop learning, to me, is the most dangerous time we'll ever have. It's not to say that we shouldn't be happy with what we have, but growth, I think, should never stop.
Yeah, that's, I actually just got back from a week-long trip with um, 11 other couples that the men are in GoBundance, and we went on a trip.
Mm,
And it was awesome. And, it was fun. It was enlightening. But, at dinner each night, they gave us a couple questions to answer. And one of them was really interesting. It, it, it's for our marriage, but it's also for my life. When
mm,
my wife comes to me, so that the question was, how do you help your spouse when they're in a certain situation? And one of the comments was, when my wife comes to me and she's complaining or she's stressed about or she wants to talk about some situation, the guy said, do you want me to feel what you're saying or do you want me to fix it?
mm,
Guys, we want to fix. We just want to
mm,
go into fix mode. All right, I'll call that friend. I'll jump in the car. I'll go do this, or this. Well, that's not maybe what my wife needs. She wants me to just to feel, just to listen to her, and
mm,
then she's fine. Or it's, yeah, I want you to feel what I'm talking about, feel what's going on with me, and then if maybe you can fix it. But that's the same thing in sobriety. We gotta, you can't fix it. You just can't get in and fix immediately. You gotta feel what your feelings. You gotta work through that, and then piece by piece, the fix comes. So I just thought
mm.
that was really interesting,
You
and
know
my
why
wife and
that's
I
so
kind of looked at
resonates
each
with
other.
me? And I don't mean to interrupt, but this is so important that you
No,
mention
it's good.
this because what you said was so important. I remember I was sitting at dinner with this girl that I was dating and I was trying to give her solutions. She's like, NJ, I don't need your fucking solutions. I need you to listen to me, right? I don't
Yep.
need you to fix it. And I go all the way back 90 years now, 89 years to in the beginning. And again, I'm going to talk 12 steps because that's what I know. When Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, he was trying to get everybody sober, and he was working with this guy from Towns Hospital, Dr. Silkworth, and he was like, "I don't understand. Nobody's getting sober. I'm trying to, I'm doing the best I can." And Dr. Silkworth said, "Bill, stop trying to smack them over the head with the solution. Just identify with them. Identify with the problem. If you try to hit them with solution, they're never going to lower their ego and have the humility to get sober." And so at that moment, he switched everything and just started focusing on the identification component and just listening and identifying. And the entire program changed on that day. And so whether you are a follower of 12 steps or not, just think about what Matt was just saying about sometimes the worst thing we could do is try to fix, and the best thing we could do is try to listen. You're a freaking wealth of wisdom, my man. So, if you were to give one piece of advice to the person who's listening that thinks that there's absolutely no hope for them, they can't stop drinking or drugging or whatever their drug of choice is, and they've just blown up their entire lives and they don't see any path forward, what would be your words of advice to that person?
Got a lot of potential answers for that, but what I would just say to that person or that 1,000 people that joined today, and 20% or 1, 2 or days in, or 1 or 2 or 5 days in, is it will work. It's not overnight.
Mm,
It's not, you're not going to fix all of the issues, all of the challenges, all of the things that have happened to you and because of you today or tomorrow. When I got sober, I had this impression that I was going to walk in the first night, after my meeting and say, honey, I picked up a white chip. I'm in AA. I'm not going to drink anymore, and think that everything was fine. My wife still did not like me very much for
mm,
quite a while. But day after day, things got a little bit better. Then there were setbacks, not alcohol setbacks, but there were setbacks. I became a dick again, or I did something stupid, or I wasn't, whatever. But if you just do it today and then try not to have a drink today, and if you make it through today, do whatever the hell you can not to have another drink tomorrow, over time, things do get better. They
Mm.
do. And I'm proof of it. I never would have thought that I could be in this position. And you hear people say that over and over again. Oh, I never would have thought this and blah, blah, blah. Don't drink or drug today. And then if you make it through today, and there's no promise of that, you make it through today and then you do the same thing tomorrow. It might be easier, it might be harder, but you just do it day after day after day.
Powerful,
I don't know if that
powerful.
answers it.
Yeah, Matt, you're a fucking rock star. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And happy frickin' 15.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man.